what is mental transference? This is an answer to a question on mental transference, mental space, and of course the stretch that can be experienced as we massage and maneuver the mental space. So, mental transference. Mental transference is the transposition of the perception, right? We might say the chief tuning fork of identity perception to a different object, person, location, being, etc. Right? This could be to a reverential, spiritual type of deity. It could be to a tree or a flower or anything else. So, mental transference requires that we liberate the perception identity from its cohesion within the body, from this particular shape and form. And in order to do that, we need to have some agency and freedom with the matrices that bind the mental body into the astral body and the astral body into the physical. So we need to specifically have agency over the mental astral matrix, which binds the mental body into the astral body. As we learn to soften this willfully, we are then able to begin exploring the transposition or the movement of the mind. Now, one of the things that you might notice when you begin to shift the mind out of the astral body is that there's a pull, right? And there's a type of stretch. And this is an indication that you are not mentally transferring. You are altering the mental space. Okay? So if we, for a moment, set aside the transposition of the mind into external objects, whether it be a cup of coffee or a crystal, a tree, a flower, or anything else, and we look at the mental body and the identity perception from just inside our own body, our own form, there's a lot to be explored here. There's a big difference between mentally transferring that perception identity and moving the mind or stretching the mind to a new location. Stretch implies 2 points. One that is, 2 points that essentially are different because they're two. One that might be moving or perhaps a movement of energy to another point. So this has to be still, this has to be still, and then we can move or stretch between the 2 points of stillness, right? It's like if you had a resistance band and it was wrapped around a tree or a pole or something and you pull it, if the pole moves with you, right, then you don't get a stretch. So you have to have at least 1 point of stillness and something moving away, right? If we don't have the resistance band, then there's also no stretch, right? So if the hand isn't holding the other end of the band, then again, there's no stretch. So we need to understand these mechanisms, because when we are looking at, say, internal arts of various kinds, martial arts, etc., qigong, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to the difference between what we're doing and what's going on. In the beginning, you might build up a lot of energy, right? A lot of life force within the body, which through some stillness and meditation basically transmutes into the astral fluid or the qi. Now, once this has occurred, we start to realize that we can, through movements of the mind, affect the energy within. And so we can explore this quite deeply, and you can get exercises that involve moving the energy within the body, and this is based on essentially working through the communicating mechanism of the energy, that communicative substance, to then inflate or deflate or stretch the fascia. And this comes down to the mental alteration of the mental shape, the shape of the mental body. So within our physical body, we might have our identity perception lodged in the mind. We might have it, if we're more of a feeling person, lodged in the astral body, right? And that would be more of the feeling type of individual. And we might have it lodged in the physical body. Now, in a lot of spiritual-esque communities, there's a lot of importance placed upon the word embodiment. And this has really no place in higher spiritual growth. It serves the function of helping us to recognize that the body can be a place of identity perception and that there's information that we can glean from the body. There's transformation, there's training, there's development, just as there is with the feeling body and the astral energies, just as there is with the mind. If we pedestalize the mental above the astral, or the astral above the physical, or the physical above the astral and the mental, then we are severing ourselves from most of the energy and opportunities that we have for development and growth. We are disguising from ourselves and hiding from ourselves much of the potential that we have. So when we are working in the body, we might say in a Taoist Qigong or Neigong or Neidan type of context, or even, Tai Chi and Qigong, etc., the basic training almost always involves bringing the mind to the lower dantian. You can't see on the camera, but I'm touching my lower belly. So you bring the mind there. Now remember that the location of the mind is where the energy will consolidate, where it will flow to, right? So if we place the mind in the lower dantian, then the energy will start to move in that direction towards the lower dantian to consolidate there. Now, there's a big difference between having 2 points of a point of identity perception lodged in the head, and from here, from the mental body working the energy into the dantian, and having the identity perception be of the lower dantian. This is very important. If we are working from an identity perception that is separate, in a separate location from where the energy is moving, then we get stretch through that motion and movement. We also get a bunch of reflective actions, we might say, within the fascia and the subtle aspects of the physical body. So when we do that, typically what will happen is we'll start to fold, right? You'll see this, where there'll be a folding of the point of identity perception towards the location that the energy, we're trying to make the energy go, which in this example is the lower dantian. That folding, it can be a real issue eventually. Okay, now this can be very subtle. And what's happening is we are attempting to reference ourselves, right? We're finding feedback about our own sense of self, which consolidates our sense of self. There's a type of power dynamic at play within our own self. So we are not mentally transferring into the lower dantian through this method. We are essentially altering the mental space, just like if you had a balloon that was filled with air or water or whatever, it's tied up and you pull a part of it. Let's say it's filled with water, you pull part of it out and the water gets sucked in that direction. There's stretch, right? There's a vacuum created through a change in the shape, and the water, the energy gets sucked in that direction, however, wherever you might be pulling. So the same applies internally in the body. And in the mental space, and how the alteration of the mental space connects to and influences the astral fluids, and through that the physical body and the internal energies and aspects of the physical body as well. This means that we then want to explore what it might mean to us to mentally transfer into the lower Dantian, which would be to shift the location of the identity perception itself into the lower Dantian. So via this method, we are not from the mental body, or from the head, we might say. We're not from the head trying to move energy to the Dantian. We are adopting a new location of identity, and through this, an actual new center of identity perception. There is no stretch involved in this, because remember, for mental transference to occur, we have the softening of that mental astral matrix. So we're not trying to shift the shape of the mental body. We're not trying to shift the shape of where the old identity perception was in an attempt to get some kind of lower Dantian action going on. You're shifting the actual identity perception to the lower Dantian. As such, through this mental transference, there is no stretch, because there are not 2 points that we're trying to move in between, right? We're not trying to, from here, go to here. You let go of this entirely, and you have just 1 point of the identity perception, essentially. And then the energy will consolidate in the lower Dantian with much more ease in a very relaxed way. There will also be no folding. So you won't have this folding into the lower Dantian. As the identity perception shifts there, you actually will end up elongating, straightening up, and essentially softening. It'll be quite a relaxing experience. Now, to actually soften the matrices and allow this to occur can be very difficult. And working within the body can also be a deterrent, because we have so much habit built into our perceptions within the body. Now, any location in the body can be used as a means of practicing mental transference, just as any object outside the body can be used to practice mental transference. So, this is a means of practicing it inside the body. And why this is important is because it can teach us the real difference between that folding that occurs and that self-referencing between mental transference and holding on to our old identity perception as we are working through the process of working with energy and alchemy and on, consciousness refinement, etc. Any power that we feel is our own resistance. It requires a perception it requires that there be at least 2, right, to feel power. Right? There has to be a point that is not moving, and another point, a point that is not moving, that is resisting movement for power to be felt. And so in a lot of arts, you get this buildup of life force, this buildup of energy, and then it's deified and pedestalized as the stretch within the body, that puffing up of the tissue under the influence of the energy. And this is looked at as, I can't wait to have that. And then people start vying after these bodies that are kind of pudgy and inflamed. That's the resistance of the tissue to the energy. And so we need to explore this. There's many ways to do that as well. So just as we can have an identity perception shift internally within the body, now we need to look at the mental space. So wherever the identity perception is, it takes on the mental space. We might say the space that the mind adopts as part of its perceptual experience. and its mental body, we might say, alters to adopt the mental shape, the mental body that is of the shape of the new identity, perception, location, object, etc. Okay? So that means if we shift our identity perception from here down to the lower Dantian, now you can from there begin to explore altering the mental shape, the shape of the mental body, and therefore the way in which the, those strands or whatever you're pulling on the balloon, once again, you start pulling on it, but the balloon isn't centered here, it's centered in the lower Dantian, or in the heart center, or in, the throat center, solar plexus, or whatever mechanism you might be working. That's obviously just the, some of the major energy centers. There's many, many more. So this is inside the body still, working with the body aspects or different parts of the body as identity perception. Next phase, of course, is to begin exploring this through mental transference to objects outside the body. So maybe you have, like we said earlier, a cup, or maybe you have like a little crystal or something, and you work on transferring the identity perception into the object, and then the mental shape, right? It adopts or adapts to become the shape of the object. Right? It used to be Nathan in some sense or another. And then we transfer it to the crystal. Now because the identity perception, the alpha tuning fork of identity and perception is in and of the crystal, the mental body takes on the shape, the attributes of the crystal. Right? And not only the shape, but also, of course, the frequencies as well. And this would apply to, if you go to a sacred temple of sorts, the statues that might be worshipped on the daily from the monks who live there of different deities, etc., you take on the shape of the deity. The mental body alters. This is one of the why in the beginning stages of deity yoga, in a traditional sense, you might spend so much time building your understanding of the deity that you're working with, meditating on all the different attributes outside the body as a separate thing. That's the first stage in the generative stage of the training, that part of the training. And then after that, you then merge, right? So what we're doing is we're kind of jumping to the merging part, right? We are taking the object, we mentally transfer into it, our identity perception becomes the object. This means that Nathan is the crystal, not this. So the mental space becomes that shape of the crystal. And from within the crystal, you can then begin to explore the teasing or the pulling of the balloon, right? Which is, of course, centered in the crystal. You can then begin teasing that mental shape out in different ways, which will create different stretches through the energy that is in and of and around the crystal. Okay? So this is you can apply this to a tree, you can apply this to a person, to a flower. You pick up a flower, it's got a quality embedded in it that's part of its makeup, right? You mentally transfer into the flower. Your mental body takes on the shape of the flower. Through this, you start to take on and begin to perceive some of the frequencies of what that color is intrinsically, the life force of the flower, many, 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 many other things as well. Whatever it might be, a rock, etc. And then you now are getting a feel for what it is to be that thing. This moves eventually into more of a polymorphism and also applies to frequencies of, any of the elements, any of the planets, constellations, etc., where you can mentally transfer into the frequency and then you surrender the old shapes and habits, identity perception becomes of the new refinement of consciousness, of light, etc., relationships to infinity, on it goes, and you open up, and that stuff can then mold the mental body. As one with this new identity perception, the mental shape takes on new form, and this starts to relay through the astral and physical bodies. So whatever you're working, the skill of mental transference and the ability to discern the difference between mental transference and post-mental transference, mental shape, and then post becoming familiar with mental shape, we then can become the intrinsic mental shape of the new object, new frequency, etc. Then we can begin to explore the teasing of that mental shape into the teasing of the balloon into new shapes or new elongations, etc., which help to move the energy in different ways, where you start to get some freedom and agency over the movement of energy within that particular mental shape, form, etc., because that is the location of the identity perception. Okay? So all this said, it's very important. There's something that comes up with Hermeticists a lot that is just because you have knowledge and have the ability to do a stage or two of a thing, of an exercise, doesn't mean that you are a master of it in any sense. So there are words that different teachers will use to differentiate different things. In the beginning, let's say we go back to the lower Dantian example that we were working with in the beginning of this video. In the beginning, the ability to surrender the attachment, to open the matrices and actually mentally transfer, it's for most of us, it's not something we're familiar with. So we need to go through the training. And this is part of any good training. You go through this in initiation into Hermetics, in trainings and workshops. We go through this in my own trainings. And as we get a feel for this, we're then able to work with this. Now, if we don't do that side of the training and we just start at the beginning from, okay, put the mind on the Dantian, we will be working from that folding capacity, almost all of us. And it's very important to not attach to and not mistake our initial experiences of the fruits of an exercise for what someone who's been doing that exercise for 30 years might actually mean when they say it. And this is where you get words that are very easy to attach to, which don't mean anything unless the difference in result or in what's actually going on can be perceived, which is why developing our perception is so important, right? So if we're just doing that very first exercise of mind on the Dantian, we'll get that fold typically in the beginning, and if we attach to our initial experiences, we won't allow for the fruits of the exercise to evolve, right? Now, if we take our first introduction to an exercise from the place of mental transference, having done some training, we might be able to move a lot further, a lot more quickly. That being said, we still want to be wary of attaching to our initial experiences of an exercise, right? Just because we have some skill in different areas does not mean that we know what it means to do an exercise for 3 decades and how that evolves, how you can let go and evolve around different centers of identity perception. Okay, so that becomes very important. Okay, that's pretty much it for this one. This applies to, let's say you're doing Zingy or like Santi, you're standing and you're projecting or whatever. Really, if you get to know that feeling of stretch, as you stretch the mind out, It's only stretching. Remember, it's only stretching because there's a point of resistance that it's stretching away from. So we want to be aware of this, and then we can begin to evolve with a lot more freedom through many, many, many intricate, varied, and enriching aspects of the practice on the developmental spiritual path. All right, thanks for your time. Hope you enjoyed this. If you're interested in training, please check the website out for courses as well as retreats. There are a number of these coming up, so hopefully I'll see you at one of those. All right, thanks a lot. Practice. Bye.